Hello, brother and sister, fellow students of the fire service. This is Captain Bill Gustin with the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department. With my dear friend, Captain Nick Morgado. We're both in the training division. We both work together at Station 2. And we're looking forward to a stimulating discussion, thought-provoking discussion on air management and SCBA emergencies in the fire service. As you know, I like to have a few things to keep me company while I'm doing this hangout. So today I've got my lucky digital flow meter and combination pressure gauge, which I'm going to talk about shortly because it has to do with our sponsor, Key Hose. Not that they make that device, but we've been testing their hose extensively. And I got my lucky 1958 auto car squad from Chicago that my dad used to ride. I am the oldest man in the room here. I just March the 6th was my 40th year with Miami-Dade, and I have 5 years up in the Chicago area. So, Nick, if you could tell a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go on to our other panels.
All right, very good. Thank you, Captain Gustin. My name is Nick Morgado. With Miami-Dade Fire Rescue in 15 years. Job, so we're going to run drills for them, as well as I coordinate our officer development programs for lieutenant, captain, and chief.
That is great. And Nick is going to give us an account of our recent medal award ceremony. Okay, we're getting very broken value. Okay, so we're gonna work on that. When it comes to air management, I don't think there's anybody that is more knowledgeable and has been written better on the subject more extensively than Captain Mike Gagliano from Seattle Fire Department. Mike is agreed to be one of our guests today. He brings a lot to the table when it comes to air management, and we can all learn a lot from Mike. Mike, a little bit about yourself, sir.
Well, good morning, good afternoon. Mike Gagliano, Seattle Fire. I'm a truck captain on Ladder 5 in the north end of the city. And I have about 33 years on the job, something like that. And as always, just honored to hang out with you guys. Really, truly honored.
Well, great, Mike, Captain Mike. Thank you so much. And then the other Captain Mike, live from Atlantic City, New Jersey, where he's on a gambling junket. You really need to get that gambling habit under control, Captain Mike. But he's coming from us from the boardwalk of Atlantic City, New Jersey. So I hope you have plenty of sunscreen on, Captain Mike. Dugan.
Absolutely, Bill. I got plenty of sunscreen on. They told me it was 82 in the pool. And
excellent.
75 degrees. So I said, okay, that's pretty nice. But yes, I got plenty of sunscreen because, I'm Irish. It's pink and peel. So, that's the way it goes. So,
excellent.
Yep, we're down in Atlantic City for a couple of days of teaching, so all looks good.
Great, Mike. Great. And thanks so much for participating. I'm looking forward to some of your insight into these subways, sub-basements, your department's policy, or maybe just your own policy as a captain, a fire captain, how far you allow your people to penetrate into an IDLH atmosphere, so as far as the distance from their means of escape. Daryl Liggins from Oakland, California. A little bit about yourself, Daryl.
How are you? My name's Daryl Liggins. My 25th year here. I'm a captain in Oakland, California, and all of a sudden I feel like a probie among you guys. It's an honor to be talking with you guys, but I know when I'm the lowest pecking order here in the room. So in this group, it's 2 ears and 1 mouth, and it'll be a fun discussion.
Well, Daryl, I do that for my ego. I feel so old, and I walk around a nursing home for a while, and then I feel a lot younger. Everything's relative. Let's give a shout out to our sponsor.
Out of that, Bill.
Yeah. A huge shout out for our sponsor, Key Hose. I am in Key Hose heaven. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue is in Key Hose heaven. And I'm going to brag for a minute. I helped with the help of my brother Nick and some of our other officers in training, and convinced the upper management of this department to convert to 2-inch hose with 2.5-inch couplings for our standpipe operation. And we've been using this device extensively to test the 2-inch hose with the 2.5-inch couplings. Our optimum pressure on the standpipe outlet, as you know, is 100 psi post 1993. Well, that's fine if we have 100 psi. But what if we don't have 200 psi? And what we found out is at 65 psi, we're still flowing about 165 gallons a minute. That is through 3 75-foot sections. That would be a total of 225 feet of the key combat ready 2-inch hose with the 2.5-inch couplings with a 1 1/8-inch tip. We've got a rather unique situation with some of our luxury high rises along the Atlantic Ocean, where you have guys like Mike Dugan, retired FDNY guys, that have penthouses where you take a private elevator directly to your condo overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The consequence of that is there's no hallways. So where were you going to put the hose? Where are you going to put the hose you're going to stretch? I'm not a big fan of laying the hose out in the stairs, but we really have no choice here. Hence, for the last few weeks, we have been snaking the key hose in stairways that are very unforgiving, and we can't make it fail, and we can't make it kink. I can't say enough about it. It is an honest, enthusiastic endorsement from me. I'm going to ask Nick in a moment to talk a little bit about our Board of Merit. And before that, I'm going to show just a few pictures. In February, we had our annual awards ceremony, and these are some of the awards recipients. And it's a peer review process, which Nick is going to upside down. This is our Gold Medal of Valor winner, and I'm proud to know him. I'm proud to know him, and he makes me proud to be on this department, and Nick is going to relate the rest of it. And this is the winner. This is Julio Puentes, who at that day was driving ladder 17. And Nick is going to give you a brief account of why he is so deserving of this award, and a little bit about our Miami-Dade Board of Merit. Go ahead, Nick.
Absolutely. Thank you, Captain Bill. To start off a little bit, tell us the history of the board. The board started around 2000. In 2000, a retired chief of our captain of ours, Captain Tom Quinn, and our now fire chief, Chief Dave Downey, were returning from FDIC, and they started reevaluating our current merit system, which was basically an employee of the month type system, which there's nothing wrong with. But a couple of problems that were identified where it wasn't working for our organization. It was limited to only 1 employee a month, so that's only 12 employees a year. Did not recognize any units for their group or team efforts, as well as there was no distinction between valor and non-valor type awards. So they put together a steering committee that consisted of 10 people of various positions within the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department, and they met several times over the next 10 months. They went ahead and attended various award ceremonies, including FDNY, Boston, Philadelphia, LA, Miami-Dade Police, as well as Florida Highway Patrol. The Board of Merit was born. The current board consists of 17 members within both sworn and non, active or retired. We have positions as far as chairman, co-chair, secretary, and investigators. And we go ahead and we receive nominations that are submitted from anyone in the field that has knowledge. Doesn't have to be someone that was directly involved, just has knowledge of an event that requires some review for a possible meritorious award. It's a blind process by majority vote, and the awards are held every first weekend in February every year.
Great. And it's, now we do it the first weekend of February, because if we did it in the first weekend of March or September, August or September, it would be uncomfortably warm and humid here in Miami. And it's predicted that we're going to have another hot, humid, rainy summer. Yes, probably will be, and which is
which is better for Nick because it really takes the pull out of the still with the heat and humidity. Nick,
Sir.
could you give an account of firefighter Julio Puentes on his meritorious act
Absolutely.
of bravery?
Last year, in January of last year, Ladder 17, Rescue 28, and Squad 69 were dispatched as part of a dive assignment involving a commercial diver. Ladder 17 was actually down the street and cleared a call and was able to arrive within minutes. When they arrived, they were advised that a commercial diver was working in a 25-foot unsupported excavation, and they had lost contact with their diver. They advised that they attempted several times to make contact and get him out of the hole, but they were unable to do so. So therefore, they called 911. Firefighter Julio Puentes was on Ladder 17, the first arriving unit, and was the only diver on that apparatus. He took into consideration and sized up the situation, considering the fact that he was the only diver on scene, and our policy states that there needs to be at least one backup diver able to jump in if should something happen. So he had no backup diver. He would be diving in a 25-foot unsupported excavation, zero visibility, and it was confirmed that the water was contaminated with raw sewage. Taking into consideration those facts and the time frame in which they arrived, he decided to take the risk, donned his proper diving equipment, and entered the hole. He was able to follow the tether down to the diver, where he located him rather quickly. Attempted twice to surface with that diver, but was unable to do so. Began to investigate why and what was preventing him from doing so. He found out that discovered his foot was lodged underneath a large rock or boulder. It's unknown whether the fact that there was a secondary collapse due to being unsupported, or the fact that maybe the diver braced himself while working underwater. In any case, he was able to dig the foot out from under the rock, surface with the diver, and where they utilized a backhoe to get the diver out of the water. He was transferred to Rescue 28, who was awaiting, and they were able to deliver the diver with a pulse and breathing on his own. For their efforts, Rescue 28 and Ladder 17 both received unit citations. In addition, Firefighter Puentes also received a life-saving award as well as the Gold Medal of Valor. So some of the pictures you can see here is just a big hole for construction that they were doing.
Brothers,
Have to be involved in that particular act. Just the fact that that's a brother and sister that committed that selfless act is in the finest traditions of the fire service. I want to talk a little bit about air management. I read a NIOSH report that was released recently, and it has to do with a line of duty death from a firefighter running out of air in a golf accessory store in the strip shopping center. And that's the motivation for today's discussion. I really thought these types of incidents were behind us because of guys like Mike Gagliano, who has been a champion of air management. I know that it has changed the way that Miami-Dade has done business. However, we're all going to relate our own most harrowing or most dramatic, most memorable out of air or air management situation. And I'll begin with myself. I was in a warehouse fire on a mutual aid call and wandered. I vaguely remember seeing a light and leaving the hose line. Now, this is back in the day. It's of steel bottles and a bell that rang, and the breathing apparatus was not positive pressure. I got off the line, wandered away, and in the back, somewhere in my subconscious, I knew I was doing the wrong thing, but I could not control myself. And Doug Wolf, who saved my life twice on this job, reached me, grabbed me by the collar, took me by the shoulders and said, "What the hell are you doing?" And he took me outside, and it was a combination of I had sucked the mask down. There was no positive pressure, and I either didn't hear the bell or it didn't ring. Probably I didn't hear it. And I'd be dead if it wasn't for Doug Wolf. And it does happen. And we read these accounts of this bizarre behavior, this loss of the cognitive ability, to the point where you could actually have firefighters that are in trouble that could be combative from hypoxia and the carbon monoxide. So this is a real serious issue. Mike, I think that you're probably the most qualified guy in the room to talk about it, but I'd like to hear your personal experiences, what your motivations were, Mike, to develop your curriculum in air management. Unmute, Mike. Unmute. Send him a hashtag.
How's that? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay now? All right. So the fire that jumps out at me, Bill, I think like a lot of these instances, it wasn't an overly sexy fire. It wasn't overly dramatic. It was a bread and butter type fire. It was a fifth wheel place, an RV place. And when we showed up, half of the thing was on fire, and the engine companies did what all good engine companies do. They laid lines, and they were fighting the fire. I was on the truck. I actually was not the senior person at the time. This is, going back a long time now. This is probably, good grief, 25, 26 years ago. And I can still remember it like it was yesterday. We were pretty much convinced that the owner of the place lived in that fifth wheel place, and he was back in the back area, a little bit away from the fire. And so we entered off of the main area where the firefighting was going on. It was heavy smoke. It was, when we opened the door, it did lift, so we felt comfortable going in with just a pump can. But we were searching through a lot of stuff, tight hallway, a lot of crap. There was stuff falling behind us, which, should have been, Amber Alert going off that, the entryway is kind of tight. And push come to shove, this is a long time ago, but you'll remember in those days, there was no air management program. Our air management program in Seattle was, you go until you run out of air, and then you take your low pressure hose, your elephant trunk, and you stick it in your coat, and you breathe off of that. And that's what I was doing when I started to not think correctly. And that's all I remember. I remember not thinking straight. I got separated from my partner, who was searching a room, and I got separated from him. And I remember going into a little tool area, opening the door. And at that point, I wasn't quite opposite the hose line, but I was now in a room that was on fire. It was a tool area. And I remember, I don't want you to think I'm weird, or at least not any weirder than you already think I am. But in the middle of that tool area, there was orange, and then right in the tool area, right in the middle, was this bluish, greenish, beautiful little flame dancing right in the middle of it, which, because of the color, probably tells you what was burning in there. It was something that wasn't good, something that wasn't normal to a normal combustion process. And I remember literally just sitting there transfixed, looking at that. It's the closest I've ever come to the fire talking to me, Bill, calling my name and talking to me. And I probably would still be sitting there looking at that flame if my partner hadn't have come, tapped me on the shoulder, and led me out of that place. At that point, I wasn't, I don't think I was really in my right mind to have navigated past all of the stuff that was in the floor that had fallen behind us. It literally was my partner, who was senior to me and still had air. He wasn't on his trunk yet. He was breathing a little better than I was. It was literally that guy that pulled me out. And we didn't have a name for it then. We just knew carbon monoxide. But literally, without a partner, there's probably a chance that I may not have navigated my way out of that place. And that's the one that jumps out at me. And it was not an extreme fire. It was a bread and butter type of fire. which, to answer the second part of your question, the reason that Phil, Steve, Casey, and I started down the road to doing air management was 3 fires in pretty short succession in Seattle fire. One was a ship fire, a big ship. Guy got disoriented, lost. Firefighters went past him because his bell was going off, but we didn't pay any attention to the bell. It was normal at that time in our department. So guys went past him, didn't even know he was in trouble. The other was a little residential basement fire. Again, bread and butter. And we had a fire captain, tenured, very good fire captain, who was literally pulling his guys towards the fire. He was so out of it with overcome with carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide, and whatever else. And the third one was a mixed occupancy. It was a business below, a hotel up above, and at the very end of that whole exchange, this firefighter trying to get to air thought he could jump off to a roof that was out a window, not noticing there was a light well, Bill, and he fell down 3 stories, bounced off the ground. And those 3 instances combined with Brett Tarver dying at the Southwest Supermarket fire are what got us moving down the road to thinking we, at least at a minimum, have got to look at what we're doing and see if we can make a difference, if we can do something different, because we're pushing things so far with our air that it's getting us jammed up. And we're not only losing guys, but Bill, the close calls across the country at the time we started, they were happening every day. You just didn't hear about them. But there were guys running out of air every single day in the nation. It was just a matter of whether that was their day that they weren't going to have, like I did, somebody to pull them out. So that's the short answer.
Mike, go ahead and elaborate on the Brett Tarver incident. I understand he became combative. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's combative, and one of the reasons I appreciate so much you guys taking the time to do this, and just so you know, you and Mike and Nick and Daryl, you guys doing a focused session on air management is literally a dream come true for Steve, Phil, Casey, and I, because this would not have happened 10 years ago. There would not be a conversation like this. Nobody was really talking about it, with the exception of it would be spoken of just a little bit when somebody died, and then it would go away. That we have come this far to where, iconic folks like yourself are actually devoting time to air management and making it a priority is literally a dream come true. The probably the saddest thing about the Brett Tarver incident is, Phoenix is a damn good fire department, man. And they were on it, and they were in there, and they had crews going into this hellhole to get him. They didn't just leave him. They had him, Bill, standing up like you and I right now. They had him, but because he had pushed past his air so far, the chemicals had started to do to his brain, to his heart, to his organs, his bloodstream. The chemicals in the smoke had started to make him not act the way a tenured veteran firefighter would act, and he literally started throwing punches. He fought him off, and he moved deeper into the fire. The only way they were able to drag him out is when he lost consciousness, essentially when he collapsed and when he died. Then they were able to pull him out. But because of all the stuff in the fires like these, it's not like at training division where you're dragging guys across a concrete floor in a building you already know. This is a supermarket with piles of crap falling everywhere and stuff falling from the ceilings, and zero viz for the rescuers who are also on a limited air supply. It took multiple rescue teams to get him out of that building, and by that time, the tragedy is that he did not make it.
Well, Mike, that's one of those fires. When the Southwest Supermarket it's like the Mary Pang, it's like the 23rd Street collapse, it's like Hackensack Ford, wall bombs, and Worcester, Massachusetts. If you're a student of the fire service, you should be familiar with those incidents. Captain Mike Dugan, I think of everybody in this room, I'm confident that you've spent more time in sub-basements, subways, large buildings than any of us. And just from a personal point of view, as far as your experience, Mike, your own experience, but then as an officer, and then you're the de facto spokesman for the FDNY. If you could just give us some insight, maybe relate a personal experience, Mike.
Well, on a personal experience, there are 2 that will remain with me always. The first one was the first bombing of the World Trade Center. Center, February 26, 1993, where the smoke traveled due to the stack effect, the cold weather outside, the warm inside the building, sub-basement fire. It was on the 110th floor in less than 5 minutes. 1,400 feet of vertical smoke movement in less than 5 minutes. We were in those stairways, climbing those stairways. We ran out of air. We were done. There's nothing to do. We still kept on going. The video that was posted on my Facebook page of that day, you can see all of us coming out of there. We're covered in black from just the smoke in the staircase. That's number one. Smoke is going to move, and you got to know your buildings. You got to know your size up, your outside temperature versus your inside temperature, which way the smoke's going to go. I mean, we've seen smoke coming down below in another fire I had, Schaumburg Plaza, where we lost 7 people. We had the fire was on the 34th and 35th floor. At the 14th floor, we started getting smoke because it was pushing down because of the differences in the temperature. So knowing your stack effect, knowing where you're going, having your air planned, how you're going to get that air is huge. And the other one that I will never forget, I was a covering lieutenant, and I went into a place for a day, and the junior guy came up to me and said, "Hey, Lou, everything's checked. We're all good." And I was working a night tour, and he said, "Everything's good. I checked all the masks, and everything's good." And I had a habit of always checking my own mask. And I said, "All right." He told me everything's good. Captain asked me to do some stuff. I'll go do the stuff the captain has to go. Well, about 1 o'clock in the morning, we had a kick-ass fire, second due, floor above. I get up to the floor above, and I turn on my scat pack. There's nothing. There's not even a there's nothing. No air. I am out of air. I did not check my own pack. A rookie, crucial mistake. Okay? You have to verify your own air. After that, I used to go in and look at it, and if it was a little on the low side, I'd bleed it down, put the bottle away to have them come recharge the bottle and put another one back in. Always made sure I had the maximum air in that thing I could have. You have to pay attention to your tools, too. In subways, I mean, geez, we've had guys, we now have things that drop down in the subways on the tracks where we can load up bottles on them to take them in there. We have 4-hour rebreathers for use in the subways. Some of the tunnels in New York City, you know, it's crazy. We have one emergency escape tunnel on the east side of Manhattan where the tunnel goes under the river, where the emergency exit stairs are 8 stories down. So you have to go up 8 stories in a smoke condition to get out into the street from the subway tunnel. Can you imagine the people on that train? You have the drunks, you have your grandmother, you have your mom, you have your dad, you have all the other people, then you have the little kids and everything else. Not going to happen. We have to know how we're going to deal with this, how we're going to get air for the civilians. We have to be aware of this. And then the big buildings, I mean, we see them all over. The Walmart headquarters down in Rogers, Arkansas, the LL Bean up in Portland, Maine. 1.5 square feet warehouse buildings. They ride around in golf carts and on those Segway scooters to pick up the stuff. How are you going to search that? What is your plan? How far are you going? You know, you and I have talked a couple of times, Bill, about search ropes and how far you go. And I tell everybody in a search with your air management, there are 2 types of search. In a building, there's a search off a rope for fire. If you are searching for fire and you don't know where that fire is and you haven't found it yet, you don't have any signatures on your thermal imaging camera, you only go in there about 50 feet is my personal number. And then you call for the engine to back you up so your crew has a hose line to protect them. If the hose is operating on the fire, and we got water here on the fire, and now we're searching for the guard or personnel, that's a whole different search. But you have to take these searches and think about what you're going in there for and what your job is there. And it's very, very important because I don't want to bring my people in more than 50 feet. The reach of the nozzle, 25 to 30 feet, you know, we'll split the difference. 50 feet is the max I would go without knowing that there was a hose line backing my people up. I'm not going 140, 150 feet into a store and then all of a sudden, it reminds you of what fire? And we all know what fire I'm talking about, Bill. The super sulfur.
Mike, Nyash, after Nyash. It's so much easier to get to aluminum and glass foil than if you have nail down security shutters. You can make it look quicker than that. So we end up 200, 250, 300 feet deep into a commercial building with a fire in the rear. That might be expedient for the speed of attacking the fire, but at that point, the priority is firefighter life, not civilian life. It's an unoccupied building. Although it's going to be difficult and it's going to take more time, we need to take a hard and fast look at opening the rear, especially restaurants. If there's a fire in a restaurant, it's going to be in the back, man. One of the gutsiest moves I ever saw was one of our brothers, Captain Alex Payon, responded on a fire in a drugstore that was about 200 feet deep. Got in there, determined that the occupants were out, and the thermal layer was already dropping, and the fire was building in the rear. He got his people back in the rig, and did a split lay in off the alley. Dropped the line, not from a hydrant, but just dropped the line, brought it in there, and it got in the rear, and that rear metal door was red hot. There was the fire. They forced that door, stuck the nozzle right through the doorway, and put most of the fire out, and the metal deck roof had partially collapsed. That took a lot of guts, but that was some heads-up thinking. And I think for every officer, you have to constantly be cognizant of how far you are from your means of escape and what the possible obstacles could be, not are, but could be in terms of collapsing storage racks. Mike, it's that important and it's that critical, and it has everything to do with air management. Daryl, sir, could you relate a personal experience?
Well, I don't have any real harrowing experience myself, and I'm very glad I don't. And I don't think anyone wants a near miss experience on themselves. But as was mentioned earlier, I've had a lot of fumbles myself, just from lack of doing personal checks earlier in my career. I had one where I missed an opportunity on the nozzle because I went to turn on my bottle and the hose wasn't connected to the bottle. So now I'm reaching back trying to connect that. And luckily that didn't put me in a bad position. And luckily someone else was there to quickly take the nozzle. That's an embarrassing moment, but it definitely reminded me we do have to perform our own checks. We can't just take it for granted that that bottle stuck in the seat or in the compartment. It's ready to go because the air's up. I had one back when I started and we still had the hose connecting to our waist belt. And water would sometimes get in those regulators that sat there. And when I went to go breathe air on a first in fire, I'm not getting air. And I was a newer member. I remember thinking somebody's going to be talking about me saying I tried to bail out of this thing because something's wrong with my SCBA, but something was wrong with my SCBA and it was filled with water. So those stories were just reminders that we have to make sure we do our proper morning checks on our own equipment. In the city of Oakland, we lost a member in 1979, obviously before my time, but as far as air management, our lesson was in the Transbay tube. If you're not familiar with the BART system in Oakland, it's our rapid transit, it's our subway system, and it connects to San Francisco under a few miles of underwater tunnel. And there's a train that goes in each direction. In the middle of these two tubes, there's a galley. Well, they had a fire on a train deep into the tunnel, a couple of miles in there. And During the course of that fire, they rescued about 40 people and a couple of BART operators, and they got off of that train through the galley onto another train that took them to San Francisco. In the process of that, the rescue train, almost like a plunger, sucked smoke through an open door left open in the galley, and it suddenly trapped a number of firefighters. We lost one that day, and another member went unconscious. They performed CPR on him, and he survived. Another member actually crawled over a mile back to Oakland through the smoke. And Oakland's answer to that was to go from half-an-hour bottles to 1-hour bottles. Now, the members that were a part of that fire said even an hour bottle would not have been enough air. But it's all we knew at the time is, you know, to increase the amount of air. It may not work for that situation, but maybe others. So I worked with hour bottles for my first few years on the job. They were old, they were steel, they were extremely heavy and just unwieldy to work with. You couldn't really fit on fire escapes with them. So we ended up going back to a modern 30-minute bottle. But our companies still carry, our ladder companies carry 1-hour bottles for that subway system. We still don't have a great answer on how to manage air for our members. One of the fires that would really scare me, and luckily we haven't got in trouble with this, is we also have ships. I think everybody here, other than our brother that just showed up from the middle of the country, we all have ships in our cities, and that's just a high-rise laying sideways in an unfamiliar area. And I can definitely picture someone getting into a situation where they're pretty far in there and then wanting to leave when their bell starts ringing and getting lost and disoriented and running out of air. And we get away with that on our day-to-day bungalow and house fires. We get away with it. It's something that isn't how we should be operating day to day, but it is what we get away with. And then another just personal experience, as far as saying manage your air and keep track of your air, you have to practice it. A couple of years ago, I was inside of this vacant building fire. We were operating in this 2.5 for quite a while, and then I just kind of popped in my head to ask my crew, you know, hey, how much air do you have? How much air do you have? And I went to check my own air and got frustrated with myself because I'm pushing the wrong buttons. And it's like, I'm better than this. I'm pushing the wrong buttons to turn on the light to be able to see the amount of air I have. So that's something I went over with my crew is, hey, we have to practice this. It's something you have to practice in the dark and see if you have the dexterity with your gloves on to know the buttons to push and exactly what those do.
Well, thanks, Daryl. We have another guest that just joined us. I think he was Sam. I think you were tied up. You were a judge at a bikini beauty contest, and you were tied up. Okay, that's fully understandable that you would be. You would take priority. Sam Hiddle from America's Heartland, Wichita, Kansas. Sam, if you tell a little bit about yourself, and then go ahead. Oh, and you know what? Let's pause for a minute. It's time for us to thank our sponsor again, Key Hose. Resistance, heat resistance, abrasion resistance, kink resistance. You'll find no better hose than Key for those key factors. Weight, be very careful with hose, even if it's for high-rise operations. You may be neglecting or sacrificing the heat, the abrasion, and the kink resistance just for the sake of lighter hose. Don't go cheap on hose. If your department cannot afford the Key Combat Ready, you get what you pay for. They have other very fine grades of hose that are a little bit less expensive, but you can't do better than Key Hose. It's the hose that our department uses. And as I said, we're making a huge purchase of it right now. 75-foot sections of 2.5-2-inch hose with 2.5-inch couplings for our standpipe operations. And our target will be a flow of 250 gallons a minute at a standpipe outlet of 100 PSI. And that's with 200 feet of hose, 25 feet of hose with an 1.1 tip. Sam, if you tell a little bit about yourself and then an experience, perhaps a personal experience on an air management problem or issue, and what your department does in terms of air management.
Okay. I'm a captain with the Wichita Fire Department. Just got my assignment to Firehouse 5 in Midtown, so I'm pretty excited about that. I obviously get to participate with some of the greats like yourself, and also with Traditions Training. And then as far as personal experience with low air, was something we experienced with our radio systems. We have the noise canceling audio software, right? What we found out was that when our low air alarm is going off, the algorithm decided to wash out our voice instead of the low air alarm. So if the low air alarm's going off, we can't get out on the radio. This was something we thought was fixed, but about 8 months later, I actually found myself in a 2-story. We were finally able to get in there. The stairs were burned out, so we went up off a porch roof. In order to get back out to the battalion, I had to come back out and take my mask off so I could radio our findings.
Sam, we had I'm not going to name the brand, but we had experimented with a digital system, and we went back on analog, and God bless our fire chief, because he fought tooth and nail for us to stay on the analog system, because the type of radio we were using could not distinguish between the low air alarm, and at the time we had a breathing apparatus with a whistle. And it doesn't distinguish between a partner saw, a rotary saw running, and your voice. I hear you, brother. Would you like to tell our audience where you've been for the last week or two, Sam?
We already told him I was judging a bikini contest, and I still lost.
Where? Yes, you still lost. Yes, you did. And where you been, Sam? You want to share it with us? Where you been?
Just got back from Hawaii with the wife, so that was nice. And I got to experience, we talk about brotherhood in the fire service, but I got to experience some of that. Shane Ferruda hooked me up with Battalion Chief Hudson up there, and he was really good as far as helping us know where to go and when to go there. So it kind of renews your faith in the fire service. We get to bickering at each other sometimes, and you go somewhere and talk to a gentleman that you've never met before, and they bend over backwards to make sure that you're comfortable.
It's great, Sam. And I think it's time for us to shout out to Sam. God bless you and congratulations, Sam. I know I bust your stones every month, but I am so happy and so proud of you. We all are, Sam. You got your extra bugle. You've been promoted to captain. And I can't think of anybody more qualified and deserving. It's good for the fire service. It's good for the Wichita Fire Department. You're a good family man. It's good for your family. And we're all very happy for you, Sam. So that comes from the heart. That doesn't mean I'm not going to bust your butt later, but God bless you, Sam.
I wear a cup every time I come on the show.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam, I'm going to tell you a funny story. My dad used to, when I was a kid, tell me I had to straighten up or else I was going to end up behind bars. And when I got promoted to captain, I sent him a pair of collar brass, and I said, Pop, you're right. I ended up behind bars. And he was like the proudest I've ever seen my dad.
It's outstanding.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Behind bars, man. You're behind bars now.
Well, it also comes with a lot of responsibility, and I don't say that lightly. It's something I've got a lot of responsibility that I'm going to make sure that I live up to.
Captain Nick, you have a what could have ended up being our sofa superstore, and that happened a few years ago, and it was an eye opener of an experience, and we had almost had quite an air management tragedy. So I'm going to let you take as much time as you want, because I think it is a valuable lesson learned.
The good captain said this was I'm going to qualify it as a near miss, because it very easily could have had a very, very different outcome. I was not at this fire. I wasn't personally involved. I was a lieutenant at the time. And I'll rewind briefly. So in 2010, our department decided to switch manufacturers of air packs. So much to the pushback we got a little bit from logistics, and due to the strong pushing of the training division at that time, we were able to get a fairly significant in-service training for these new air packs. It wasn't as easy as just put these air packs on the truck, as which they were leaning to do. So we were able to put every sworn member of the fire department, including the fire, through an in-service on these new packs that included normal operation, bells and whistles, normal emergency operations, including buddy breathing, as well as emergency operations connecting to our RIC packs at the time. So everybody went through it. So that was back in 2010. Not too long after that, we had a very significant fire, which was a very low frequency event for us by a couple reasons. It was at the 163rd Street Mall, which is appropriately located on 163rd Street. It was a subterranean underground corridor, U-shaped, about 800 feet from end to end. We don't work too often underground. And as luck would have it, or Murphy would have it, there was a electrical vault in the center of that U. Obviously, we had a significant event. There was an eruption, explosion. Fire erupted, producing heavy, dense, greasy, oily, black smoke, pretty much from end to end. So our crews, to combat that fire, extended over 350 feet of 3-inch hose with the gated Y, and were connecting 1 3/4 lines. So they were operating approximately 400 feet underground in this underground tunnel. The battalion chief that was managing that operation ran out of air managing it. So he was able to quickly locate a fireman that was under his command and connect up and buddy breathe. While they were exiting, it's a long walk, 400 feet, especially when you can't see anything, the both of them ran out of air. They were able to find another firefighter, and the three of them walked out together with no mayday ever being declared. In the afterwards, in the hot wash afterward, the battalion chief was very adamant that this was not a mayday situation. The problem was mitigated by buddy breathing, and that they knew their way out, so no mayday was necessary. We use this near miss because it very easily could have had a different outcome as part of our air management program and training that we do. We reference it quite often, and I can't pose enough to everyone listening that if you think you have to buddy breathe, it's a mayday. If you have to buddy breathe, it is a mayday. Just because you've mitigated it for the circumstance does not mean that you are good to go. So it is definitely a mayday.
Passport accountability system, which is nothing new. I first became acquainted with that in Trinidad when I was doing some training, and they use the UK system, Caribbean. And the Brits have been using the BA control system for years. And they use a tally. They use their tally and they put it on a board, and they have a clock. And where we drop the ball is that we do a pretty good job of knowing who and what company is in the IDLH atmosphere. But where we completely drop the ball is how long those companies were in that IDLH atmosphere. And it was our fault. It was our mistake. We had lost our sense of priority, and it was a huge wake-up call. You know, when something bad happens, you've got to learn from it, and you can't sweep it under the rug. And my department is very good about airing our dirty laundry in public. When we make a mistake, we not only broadcast it amongst the department, but we broadcast it to the world. So Nick, thank you for bringing that up. It was and PCBs. This was old transformers, blew the doors off the electrical vault, spalling of the concrete. It was a frigging blast furnace. To their credit, it was physical toughness, tenacity, teamwork. For them to stretch, they combined several companies to do this. One of the biggest mistakes they made, though, is their objective should have been to get the line in position and then go back out. And this is what we teach. And Nick runs our officer development program. And that's one of the fundamental principles we teach is make sure your crew has a realistic expectation of what their mission is. Hey, we're going into this Walmart and we don't know where the fire is. Okay, and we're either going in with a rope or we're going in with a hose line behind us with another crew. But listen, we're going to get in there. We're going to use 1/3 of our air to try to find this fire. We're going to use 1/3 of our air to get out, and the other third of our air, in case we have something like a storage rack fall over because of the flow of sprinkler heads. So it's an entirely different type of mindset when we're going into a large commercial building. And it's something that we've been very lucky. Now, in 1980, we were not so lucky. We did lose a firefighter in a sprinklered building that was just loaded. It was abandoned, loaded with garbage. And back in those days, guys, and I'm sure it was the same with you, we fought every fire the same: church, restaurant, apartment building, hardware store. We'd pull up, pull an 1 3/4 pre-connect, operate off of our booster tank, and most of the time we were successful. And we were just, it was just dumb luck. Well, the luck ran out that day. One fire officer was killed, and when he ran out of air, and we had a couple of firefighters that would have died had it not been for a heads-up company running a partner saw that cut an overhead door in the back. The guys heard the saw, went towards the sound, and got out. Today, that wouldn't happen because of air management. Also, we would force alternate means of egress. We're getting close to our time, but I think we still got some time to talk. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Anything to add? Anybody?
Well, Bill, if I could just let you in on something that just happened in my region, literally last week, as a source of encouragement for the air management discussion. One thing that I was, just listening to everybody's discussions, you'll notice that Sam talked about the technology failing. Expect the technology to fail. Practice in such a manner that whether you're using a tick or whether you're using a voice amplifier or whatever you're using, expect that the technology may not work and take care of yourself. Make sure that you're in a position to be successful and operate as if the technology is not going to save your bacon 100% of the time. I can tell you, I'm very proud of a department just right across the highway from us. Seattle Fire is, because of our efforts in air management, known for being progressive as it comes to air management. Let me just tell you about Bellevue, Washington Fire Department. You've taught there, Bill, Mike. I know you have. I assume some of the rest of the boys on the panel have taught at Bellevue. Just a really quality department. Last week, that fire department, that chief officer, that fire marshal, they went up against the business interests in our region. And those firefighters, Bill, are going to have an air standpipe in their new high rises. And get this, in all tunnels over 300 feet. They're going to have firefighter air replenishment systems where, just like you get water at your standpipe at distant locations, that fire department, their firefighters are not going to have to lug bottles in and try to figure out where to put them. They got the code passed. They're going to have that air standpipe in their systems. Now, I wish I could get on here and beat my chest about Seattle Fire being the leader in the region. I have to give it to Bellevue, Washington. It was their leadership that did it. And Bill, here's the key thing about this. There's all kinds of aspects of air management that are important. This firefighter air replenishment system is critical because the air is available right when you go in. It's there. You know, you're at floor, or you're 500 feet into the tunnel and you can't see. That air is there and available for you. And boy, you know, I just I can't say enough about a department that here's the change that happens. I watch this happen occasionally when I go to departments. Instead of arguing about the costs, instead of arguing about the politics, instead of arguing about the time, effort, and energy it's going to take, I watched a fire marshal look me at the eye and go, "Good grief. If they can refill their bottles in the stairwell, that will absolutely transform our operation." That's the change I'm waiting to see from firefighters and fire officers to actually make it worth doing. We would never go into these buildings, advance very far in without water. I cannot understand why we're willing to do it with such limited air when there's something in place that can take care of that for us. So, you know, on the technology side, Bill, that's kind of a cool thing that happened in my region. And obviously you and Mike and a group of us are trying really hard to see that type of technology moves forward. The other thing I would say is, a couple of you have talked about it. To be successful, we need air and water. You have to be volitional in your approach to air management. You have to think about, what is the objective I'm going to do? How far am I going to be in this place? What are the current conditions and what can they go to? Bill, in a ship fire I was in, the one, as a matter of fact, I told you, a Seattle firefighter got jammed up. All throughout that place, because the ship was being renovated, there were holes cut within the decking of the ship. You could have, for, you know, a 10-foot walk out the ship, you could have all the air in the world. You walk through that zero vis and you get over into one of those holes and you fall down into one of the holes, all of a sudden, that 10-foot of air is now, it's going to take a while for them to get you out. And it's zero vis in that hold, just like it is in the path we were walking. We have to be volitional in what we're thinking about when we approach air management. It's absolutely critical to surviving the incident, and not only surviving it, but also doing the job that we want to do. We have a job to do while we're in there. We got to take care of folks. We got to take care of each other, and we got to make sure that the citizens are being taken care of as well.
Mike, I couldn't put anything better. And we're going to share a link for the firefighter air replenishment system. It won't be in our lifetime that we see it universally used, but it will happen. It will happen. And someday they're going to look back and they're going to say, "This was crazy. This was crazy. You mean to tell me these guys," and Mike Dugan mentioned this reverse stack effect. You know, we predicate our high-rise procedures on the floor below and ascending to the floor below and climbing the stairs if the elevators are unsafe or we're at the 7th floor or below. There's no guarantee that you won't have smoke on a hot summer day right down to the floor. So you're climbing those stairs on air, Bill Carey. And we talked about that as far as that other issue that I know you're there and you're watching me. And I'm also going to oblige Bill. He's reminding us positions and classes are filling up very quickly for the Fire Department Instructors Conference, which is April 23rd through 28th in Indianapolis, Indiana. I know of no one who has ever gone to FDIC that said, "Man, was that a mistake?" I know of everyone except, I have to say, yeah, there was one guy that went to Sam Hiddle's class, but he said, "It was great. It was great except for that one class." So we're right at the 1 hour mark. I'm going to ask from my left to right, Daryl, brother, if you could just really quickly tell, are you teaching at anything at FDIC, Daryl? And do you have any final thoughts for us, sir?
No, unfortunately, I'm not going to be there this year. I'm going to be with family. You know, we're always trying to balance family and professional life, and I won't be making that journey this year. My final thoughts are, you know, is for everybody to read NIOSH reports and really look at all the facts, and don't think it's past that you or your department can't be in that position. I mean, when I'm looking at some of these that may appear to be air related, sometimes it's things like entrapment or lost and disoriented, which then leads to running out of air, call a mayday early. Call a mayday as soon as you think you're lost or disoriented, or you think you're running low on air. Don't wander out of a place on your own if you don't have eyes. You have a thermal imager, and if you don't have a thermal imager, grab somebody that does and see if they can, get you out of the place. And, learn from all of our, mistakes, including mine, and make sure you perform a good morning check on your SCBA. All the hoses are connected. You're good at putting it on. You know what all the buttons and bells and whistles do, and we'll keep each other safer.
Thanks, Daryl. Thanks, brother. Brother Mike, Captain Mike, any closing thoughts, sir?
Sure. I don't know which Captain Mike you're talking to, so I'll take this one.
The handsome one. The handsome one.
Okay, sorry.
It's you, Captain Mike.
Well, that has to be Dugan. Okay, closing thoughts. Again, I'm absolutely, this is a dream come true that firefighters, men of your stature, would be speaking in a public forum about air management and doing it so transparently and so humbly. It's a dream come true. This was not the way it was 10 years ago when we started up. Nobody wanted to hear about it. Nobody wanted to talk about it. I would just encourage those of you that are listening to take your air seriously, both for the job you want to do and the life you want to live with your loved ones as you move forward. Managing your air, taking care of your air is critical. And if you doubt me on that, I just encourage you to take a tour through any cancer ward, and you're probably going to find some firefighters of Mike's and Bill's generation, certainly now mine and Daryl and Sam's, that we all now live in the age of plastics. The smoke is unforgiving, and the smoke will make you do things that you would never imagine that you would do, both because of the disorienting nature of the smoke, how thick it is, how quickly it lights off, if we had time to talk about fire dynamics, and then what it will do to you chemically, what it'll do to your body. The carbon monoxide is going to have a significant impact on your blood and on what happens to transferring oxygen. The hydrogen cyanide and some of the other chemicals are going to irritate, and they're going to cause your organs not to be able to use any oxygen that could be transmitted. You might be the best trained firefighter in the world. You might be a Gustin, a Dugan's, a Liggins, a Hiddle. You might be a Nick. I mean, you might be one of those. Those chemicals don't care. When you get hypoxic, when your oxygen goes down, when the poisons get in your system, you're going to do things that are going to make you behave in a way that will impact not only the operation, but impact the survivability of yourself and your crew, and it doesn't have to happen. Air is absolutely critical, and I would just encourage every one of you to make it one of your basic skills. Make it one of the things that you train on all the time, because you're going to need it to do the job you want to do. You're going to need it to not only provide the absolute best service possible to the citizens, but also in my world, and I know in the world of the men on this panel, it's very important that we take care of our families. Ann and I are, Bill, you asked what we're doing at FDIC. Ann and I are actually going to be doing a firefighter marriage class at FDIC. First time one's been done. The book that you guys contributed to on firefighter marriage is going to debut there. Man, Bill, I can't even fathom the horror of the look on my wife's face if she got that call from the chief of the department that I didn't survive a fire. I can't even imagine what that would look like. I am committed to doing everything I can to taking care of the citizens, and if they're in trouble, you better believe I'm going to lay my life on the line to take care of those citizens. I made that commitment when I put the badge on, but that does in no way keeps me from honoring my commitment to my wife and to my crew, that I'm going to do my best to see that they get home, not only to their spouses, but to their families, their parents, their kids, and everybody else. Air is a critical component of seeing that happens, both on the job and when you retire.
Very well said. Captain Mike Dugan. Mike, any closing thoughts? And listen, I know we're going overtime. I don't care. This is poignant. This is important, and we're going to take the time. We're all here, and we'll take a few more minutes.
Mike,
Go ahead, Captain Mike.
Mike is right. Your air management, it has to be something that you take into account. There were two stories I remember. We always did something in the FDNY, which we went into a project building, depending on the height. Some of them were up to 36 stories high. We always chalked open the lobby door so other companies could crawl in behind us. And then we chalked open the staircase. The negative stack effect, all of a sudden, sometimes the lobbies would become full of smoke. Fire was on the 15th, 20th, 25th floor, and we're bringing it down because we're doing. If what you're doing is not working, look at it. What is causing that? You are causing part of that. Think about these things and look at them. The other thing on this, when you are in with your crew, let's just say you're going to a fire on the 10th floor. If you run into smoke on the 5th floor and mask up on the 5th floor, you'll have to let command know that we are in smoke in the staircase on the 5th floor. We're walking up to the 10th floor. We are in smoke on the 5th floor and masking up in the stairwells. The time they think that it's going to take you, you're not going to hook up as well to the standpipes. You're not going to find the searches as well because the stairways are now contaminated. You're going to have to search the stairways for victims. All of these things, as soon as you see smoke in that building, you have to communicate it to command and go on air.
Mike, excellent point. And we could do a whole program on this reverse stack effect because we all have hot weather, some of us more than others. Sam, any closing thoughts, ideas?
Yeah, I'll go through them fairly quickly, but
don't worry about it. Hey, this is an important one. We can take the time.
I do get to participate with Mike Champo in the Truck Company Essentials. I believe it's sold out, but if there's a waiting list, it's a great class. We have a great cast of characters. And then I also, I've taken all of your old articles and redid it, and Forcible Entry Wins are in the details, as you've always accused me of. So
I stole them from Tom Brennan. You know, you steal them from me. Somebody will be stealing them from you someday.
No, I keep hearing in the short time I was on water and air. And I'd just like to point out that, you know, when the USFA went in and they redid how we were able to look at our line of duty deaths, I did a 10-year sample, and 90% of the fatalities in large area were on the hose line. And at first that kind of surprised me that 90% had water in their hands. And then you started thinking about it, and a lot of us don't search it. Okay, a lot of us don't feel comfortable searching large areas. We're not practiced as a department. We don't have policies. The problem is if something happens to that hose line, or those guys get jammed up on that hose line, whether or not we search is no longer a choice anymore, is it? Just something to think about. The other thing is, you know, like Daryl pointed out, call that Mayday early. I think one of the scariest things in the fire service for the firemen is the kitchen table. We're afraid to call a Mayday, and we're going to get beat up over coffee the next morning, or we're going to get beat up at dinner. Have something in your policy that allows you to call that Mayday off. If you can call a Mayday and then you have procedures for calling it off, if you are able to hook up your buddy breathing and walk out, you're more likely to do it early, because it doesn't have to be as big of an event as we tend to think of it. And then, of course, my final thought is, and this is where I failed, and I have to live with this fear of what's going to happen to me later, but how many times we go into a cooking fire, and again, me particularly, I walk into cooking fires all the time throughout my career with no mask on. It's just a cooking fire. Well, if you look at what Teflon's doing, it creates Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. So even though we don't have a significant event and fire's out on arrival, we're still taking in some very toxic smoke that has significant health effects on us.
Sam, thanks very much, brother. And that's an excellent point. Captain Nick, any closing thoughts?
I'll share one thing. That air management program or class that we do, particularly to our command level officers. Just as it's a responsibility for those working in the hazard zones to manage their air, it's also vitally important for them as ICs, supervisors, to also manage their time that they're spending
inside that the hazard zone, they don't overextend their stay. Sometimes it's not as apparent for those working to monitor their air in the clock, and they may be in a better vantage point to manage their time that they're working in the hazard zone, as well as line up resources to be able to replace them so it doesn't negatively affect the operation.
That's excellent point, Nick. I want to thank our sponsor, Key. That's keyfire.com. Keyfire.com. You will not find better hose for kink resistance, abrasion resistance, heat resistance. Sam, oh yes, and if I'm going to ask our friend Bill Carey, who's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, he's behind this curtain. Pay no attention to that man. To post, I will have Nick submit his email address, and we can anybody that's interested can get information on Miami-Dade's Board of Merit. And I'll leave you with this thought that Sam. Are not the only guy wearing a hat in the group. Now, Miami-Dade has been looking, we are very, very serious about our research and development. And you want to know, no joke, this is my grandfather's helmet, and I wore it all through the 70s. So
That is a beautiful
either, but I have to tell you, fellas, either the helmet has shrunk or my head has gotten bigger, because if I leave this thing on too long, it's going to constrict the circulation to my brain. So I'm going to take it off, and I'm going to say goodbye to all of our viewers. I think this was by far, it's got to be the best discussion we ever had. And I think the reason is that we were so brutally honest with our viewers and with ourselves. And brothers, on the panel here, you know how proud I am every month to be with you guys. And it's just, this is what brings joy to me at this point in my life. So until next month, I wish everybody the best of health, happiness, and may God protect you and keep you safe in this most noble profession. Goodbye until next month.